He is in for the touchdown.
LSU has done more in this season than we've seen in recent history.
Clemson is the best team.
I think the Buckeyes, for what they've done so far, is the #1 team in the country.
Touchdown, Alabama.
Who's in?
Welcome to Rankings Reaction presented by Cheez-It. The rankings are coming out as we speak, and we are already reacting. This is a fired-up couch. Every single year, Mike Golic Jr. and I get to hang out on his couch. I wish I got more invites when we weren't doing the show. I mean,
Yeah, no, you know what this is. Like, let's, I don't want to make it weird right now to start off. Like, we're happy to have everyone back, but this is business, baby.
This is another year where I can't put my feet on the floor. Like, I'm sitting with the crossed legs up here to hide the fact that the feet still don't like. I mean,
Hey, listen, I was going to say, you've at least learned by now to cover up your flaws, and we appreciate that.
Well,
we want to put our best foot forward because we got new friends here.
Well, and this is, see, we got fancy. I'm just saying we got fancy a little bit. We want to welcome the what is it? The Wolfpack is growing by 2. We'll go with that. So
Wolfpack, I like that.
We'll say Wolfpack. Let's talk for a second about what it means to be sitting on Mike Golic Jr.'s couch.
This is the most comfortable couch I've ever been on.
Definitely a couch I would
it's super
love to go
comfy.
sleep
It's
on.
deep. Yes, exactly.
All right, Christine Williamson, Harry Douglas joining the fun today. Also, Kevin Nagandi is going to join us a little bit. We got, it's star-studded. I mean, your couch is just a star-studded.
It is nice. It is. And you know what? We are brand new this year, too. Shout out to Cheez-Its, man. We have made it. We started from the bottom on this couch, and now I am eating Cheez-Its out of a bowl that is clearly sponsored.
Can I be
Only in America.
So,
Can I have one of those?
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, I guess. Let's be honest, too. The bowl was really full about half an hour ago, and we are
like halfway
destroying
full now.
all of the cheese.
Yeah.
The fun thing is, for anyone that hasn't tuned in, this is Rankings Reaction. We will do this every single Tuesday. We will get your reaction to the rankings as they come out, and we've already had some big surprises as they're coming out. We'll get to in a second. This is our 3rd year together doing this. It's epic, so let's get right to it. There's been some surprises along the way. If you're watching on ESPN right now, they've been going from the bottom and they're getting you to the top. We're just now getting to the top 4. We'll get there in a second. But a couple of big surprises. Minnesota much lower than most of us expected. So that's an immediate sort of statement from the committee on what the committee values. Minnesota falling in at, what was it, 17? I'll get a confirmation of the numbers. Yeah, down in the teens.
But they have a chance with the schedule they have coming up to move up to where they want to be. I don't like it at all. I don't like them being at 17 because they're undefeated. You got to reward them for being undefeated.
Well, we'll actually start at 21 through 25. So you got Memphis, Boise State, Oklahoma State, Navy, and SMU. A little bit of AAC love there for Memphis and SMU who faced off on Saturday.
Obviously not the sexiest portion of this rankings, but an important one because we know the highest ranked Group of 5 team is eligible for a New Year's 6 bowl game. And that's a crowded field this year when you talk about Cincinnati, Memphis, SMU, a lot of these great teams that we've seen already putting it on. You were just down walking in Memphis last weekend for College Game Day. Look ridiculous there.
By the way, big win for Memphis on game day, beating SMU, who was undefeated coming into the game. I thought SMU was going to have the advantage in that game. It did not turn out to be that way. Mike's reacting to things I haven't even seen yet. Can we get up there one step at a time? That gets us to the very low part. But you make a point about the Group of 5 and the highest ranked. They are fighting for something. A New Year's 6 bowl game means so much to a program that is trying to rise, and we've seen that with UCF. We're seeing that with Memphis and SMU this year. They're trying to fight for some level of relevance nationally, so that's why we keep our eyes on
I like both of those programs. I actually thought SMU was going to go through the year and go undefeated. It did not happen. Memphis beat them, so if Memphis wins out, it's interesting to see how that's going to go.
It's really wild, though, what Sonny Dykes has done with that program. We mentioned how they've been since the Pony Excess days, all that great stuff that everyone's got to see in the 30 for 30. But what they put together down there, Shane Buechele, who we all saw at Texas not too long ago, has been balling for them this year.
What about those receivers, though?
Man, those receivers, the running backs, they have a skill group there.
The defensive line is good, so they have guys at key positions who's going to play at the next level. So I really hated to see them lose that game, but hey, that's why you play the game. That's why you play the game on Saturdays.
I'll counter that. Mike Norvell, the coach in Memphis, has taken over for Justin Fuente. Has done a beautiful job there. And at game day, he every time he had the opportunity to speak, what he kept stressing is that his job is to put players in the situation where they can be as successful as possible. It seems very elementary. Not every coaching staff is great about that. And I've already, the rumor mill has started around Florida State.
There you go. You took it out of my mouth. The phone calls need to be ringing, baby.
From the people who
Coach Norvell.
DJ flex 7-year extension in Minnesota. Mike Norvell getting broke off in Memphis.
Memphis, talk while I eat a Cheez-It. If you
Well,
don't
no,
mind.
the interesting thing is, too, is I feel like Memphis is a team we would have talked a lot more about the last couple of years were it not for UCF. Like, they were the team playing UCF in the AAC title games while they were claiming national championships and all these things. Memphis has we've been watching some of their running backs ball out in the NFL. Darrell Henderson out in Los Angeles backing up Todd Gurley. Like, there were players all over the field for them that just didn't get their just due because UCF was so good.
Well, I love seeing the ball fly across the field. I'm an offensive guy, Mike. You know this. So I like to see guys putting up points, explosive offenses going against defenses. So I'm all for it.
Notice that they didn't include us on that conversation.
It's a football thing, so I'm just going to let them have that conversation.
No, that's fair.
Yeah.
That's fair.
Yeah.
If you're just tuning in, Rankings Reaction, we will be here every single Tuesday. Mike Golick Jr., Jason Fitz, Christine Williamson, Harry Douglas. We are hanging out right now on Mike's couch, getting you the reaction as we make our way up through the rankings. That we told you 21 through 25. We got surprises in the next block as we get into the teens, because that's where we started to see, as we mentioned before, Minnesota. I think the guys have the graphic on 15 through 20. We'll work on getting that up for you next. And again, Minnesota was one of the teams. There were a couple of Minnesota, Baylor, undefeated teams that we were trying to keep an eye out on what to look for. And Minnesota, it was a bit of a statement that they weren't higher. That is the committee telling us something about where they view Minnesota right now.
Well, this is the interesting part, and guys, I'm always interested in how much this weighs in for you, because we all do our own mock selection committee in our brains, and how much the eye test weighs on a lot of this stuff, because we can all sit here and look at the numbers. I got all these strength of resume stuff that the committee loves, but when you look at these teams, and I look at Minnesota, what they've accomplished is great. But we all know we're measuring them against Ohio State in the Big Ten. We all know we're measuring Baylor against what we believe Oklahoma to be, despite that Kansas State loss, and we're not sure it stacks up.
Well, one thing I like about Minnesota, they have a guy in their secondary, Antoine Winfield Jr., and the name definitely sounds familiar. It's the son of Antoine Winfield that played at Ohio State, played with the Minnesota Vikings. He's top 5 in the nation right now in interceptions. So I love what he's doing, but you go to the opposite side of the ball. Tanner Morgan, he's playing great football.
Man.
Rodney Smith, playing great football at the running back position. They have 2 guys at receiver. One, Tyler Johnson, who's going to go in the first round this year in the draft, and they have another one in Bateman. Those 2 guys right there are carrying this offense right now for Minnesota.
You guys can chime in, hashtag Rankings Reaction. I think that's how you get to us. We'll get to interacting with you guys in just a minute. We'll figure that out. But the rankings are out, so we're going to start at the top. That's what everybody's curious about. That's what everybody's hot on. Let's see what the committee has told us, and I'm telling you some shockers here. At number 1 overall for the College Football Committee, they've given us Ohio State.
Man.
Number 1 for Ohio State. I'm a little surprised, guys. I thought LSU might be at the top of the rankings, but LSU is at number 2. I don't think it surprises anybody that LSU, Ohio State were 1 and 2. It's just a little bit surprising on the order there. Alabama at 3. So Bama comes in with 3. And that's where this is where the surprise comes in. Penn State at number 4. Penn State at 4, which means Clemson, our defending national champions, left out of the initial top 4. They are sitting at 5. So now we got to presume number 6, right? We all feel like we know this is going to be Georgia. It is Georgia. So a one-loss Georgia team finds their way in at number 6. But again, Ohio State 1, LSU 2, Bama 3, Penn State 4, and then Clemson at number 5. So when you look at this list across, look at that. What surprises Mike? What surprises you the most there?
Honestly, Ohio State at 1 surprised me a little bit. I thought with the quality wins that LSU had so far, now that's, shuffling deck chairs in the Titanic. Like both of those teams are going to have opportunities, all these different things. The Penn State one was the one that is actually the least surprising to me in there, given what Penn State has done so far in this. But Ohio State, they've been, I think in most people's minds, because of what last year was, a disappointment by their standard, the most impressive team in the country, because they've got legitimate Heisman Trophy type guys on both sides.
Guys, and I said this before, they have guys at each level on their defensive line, linebacker core, and secondary who's going to go in the first round of this year's draft. I don't think any other team in college football even has that. And then you look on the offensive side, you have J.K. Dobbins. When the weather gets bad, as it does up in Ohio, and it comes to crunch time football, you can hand that ball off to J.K. Dobbins and let him do his thing.
Can we give a little love to Ryan Day? I mean, we almost forget that Ryan Day has stepped in and just taken over, and this offense is more efficient. The numbers are better than they were. Their yards per game up, their points per game up. I mean, they are a better offense.
But you know what they say now?
Right now.
Players make the coaches. The coaches don't make the players.
You have
the players. But check this out, though. You have the players in position So those players are making Ryan Day look good. Don't get me wrong, he's a great coach. But when you have the guys on your roster, look at Michigan. Michigan doesn't have the players that Ohio State have, so Jim Harbaugh is struggling.
No, but I think a lot of people would also say now Justin Fields being the exception, but they had a first rounder in Dwayne Haskins last year who wasn't really a slouch on that offense. And we know there was just a lot of noise around Ohio State last year. They were giving up more big plays on defense than we've seen from them in quite a while. You had Nick Bosa out with the year with injury, which obviously affected the ways they're going. And then Urban Meyer missing the first few games of the season. We knew all the clouds and the outside noise from what happened with Zach Smith that were hanging over that team. And now this year, it's been very quiet around Columbus. And Ryan Day, I think, deserves some of that. Now, he's not the play designer, the offensive mind that Lincoln Riley is, but he's a good one. And I think he deserves credit for stepping in for a top 2 or 3 college football coach of this modern era in Urban Meyer.
And I love the job that he's done with Justin Fields.
Yeah.
He's played to his strengths, and they always say great coaches play to their players' strength. They don't make them try to fit their system. And he's done a great job with Fields in doing that.
So one of the graphics that just popped up on the screen for anybody watching, Rankings Reaction, we're hanging out on Mike's couch, getting you all caught up in everything you need to know. One of the graphics said the first number 1 team has never gone on to win a national championship. So, Christine, do we put anything in?
The first number 1 team has never gone on to win a national championship. Okay, I get that. But the number 1 team every single year has been in the college football playoff. So
I mean, it's difficult to find a path that doesn't send Ohio State to the playoff, right? Like, I mean, they're just so stinking good.
Yeah.
I mean, they have Penn State coming up. That's going to be a big one. And you have the Big Ten championship. So,
But the committee has already shown us tonight, if you're just tuning in, your top 4, Ohio State 1, LSU 2, Bama 3, Penn State 4. I would argue that Ohio State could take, it's time to apply the SEC logic to the Big Ten here then. Yeah. Ohio State can take a loss to Penn State, and it won't, if it's a good game, it won't derail their season. They can still go to the playoff.
I think the Big Ten is the best conference this year. When you look at the teams, look how many teams they have ranked this year.
Okay, I get that.
You have 4 teams that's undefeated right now, or 3 teams. 3 teams that's undefeated, and they all have to play each other. But at any given point, that's why you play the game. That's what I love about it. Well, and that's why I can't wait for this Minnesota Penn State game this weekend.
Absolutely, and I think that's one of the biggest advantages they have in all this. Is, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ohio State and Penn State are on the same side of the Big Ten. They're both in the Big Ten East. And that's the same thing that you've had with Alabama and LSU, which is why we talk about the ability to get 2 in. Because when you've got 2 teams that the committee has showed you, they value enough in these rankings, and one gets the chance to sit out and still get quality wins. Like Ohio State would still get to beat Michigan, and I think they have a chance to beat them soundly at the end of the year in a rivalry game that we all pay attention to. There's still an opportunity there, even being idle on conference championship.
And that's a Michigan team a lot of people are high on now.
Yep.
Based on their last 2 games in the second half of the Penn State game, they're just playing great football.
Yeah, that Notre Dame game certainly helped them too.
It's too soon.
It's always going to be too soon.
You know, the Penn State example, too, is just a reminder, and we talked about it this morning on Golic and Wingo. You've got to keep an eye on strength of resume, strength of record. Because as much as we all look at strength of schedule constantly, the committee looks at your record versus what they think another top 25 team would do. And it's a metric that's sort of buried on ESPN, but it matters. Game control is another metric that's buried on ESPN. And these are 2 big metrics to the committee. And Penn State is favorable in both of those in the highest possible way.
I tell you what, that's why I am super surprised by Baylor. Baylor is number 5 in strength of resume. Now, being undefeated helps in that, certainly, but they're 5th in strength of resume, and they're well outside the top 10 in these first rankings. I was shocked by that.
Well, I think for Penn State, they've got this is also such a, let's say, I don't think the committee looks at things this way, but they had very little risk in putting Ohio State and Penn State in the top 4 because it is going to work itself out. Alabama, LSU. It is going to work itself out. I mean, it feels like
a lot of teams have to play each other still, so it's going to fill in the blanks that everybody and the question marks that everybody have.
But by the way, we haven't even addressed the fact that the defending national champion is Clemson, and they're number 5.
They are where they belong. Trust me. They are where they belong.
Do you think that there's any chance when the season is done, if Clemson goes undefeated, are they still out of the top?
No, you have to put them in there. If they're undefeated, they win the ACC championship. You have to put them in there. They still have to play a Wake Forest team who only has 1 loss.
Who are
damn good on offense. Trust me.
Wake Forest is somewhere in the 20s in this ranking. So are going to be a ranked team. They get there. They'll get South Carolina at the end of the season, which has that win over Georgia, which people all of a sudden will be on the radar for them, certainly. I don't think Clemson will get left out, but they are right where they belong right now. I figured it was going to be kind of between them and Bama down there, common opponent in Texas A&M, all these different things that you can point to in this. But Clemson, we know the thing that's sticking in everyone's craw is that North Carolina game. 1 point win over North Carolina. That, for a lot of people, was an excuse.
Yeah.
The quarterback just hands the ball off to the running back.
My God.
They lose that football game.
Yeah.
It's read option 101.
So again, your top six, as we've been breaking down all morning, your top six are pretty simple. Right now, we've got all morning, all night. Ohio State feels like morning. Who knows?
Where am I?
Ohio State is at 1, LSU's at 2, Alabama is at 3, Penn State's at 4. Again, Clemson 5, Georgia 6. Let's take a look at 7 through 10 because these are also teams just on the outside. But there's a couple of interesting placements here because there'll be an opportunity to grow here. When you look at 7 through 10, they're going to put a graphic up on the screen in just a second.
I was going to say, I think this is the most important thing we learned tonight, by the way, as we look, because we always see, now usually it's a team outside of the top 10, but there's always someone that jumps in. We know I forget the specific stat about teams in the top 6 of the first ranking. There's a high or high correlation between those first rankings and who ends up in the playoff. But someone from the outside always jumps in, and we now have 2 teams, really, that are well positioned for that because of the committee's initial ranking here.
Well, and those 2 teams at 7 and 8, I mean, are the keys here. 7, you've got Oregon. 8, you've got Utah. So if you're a Pac-12 fan, you're sitting back here saying this was the best case scenario. Right? I mean, this is giving your 2 teams the opportunity to get an epic win moving forward, and maybe that's enough win to put them in the playoffs.
Yeah, it's basically the committee saying that they think the Pac-12 is better than the Big 12. So with Oklahoma after both Utah and Oregon, and then obviously an undefeated Baylor, not even in the top 10, the committee is saying that they value the Pac-12 over the Big 12.
Don't y'all sleep on Oklahoma. I'm telling y'all now.
Yeah.
Oklahoma, listen, if Baylor keeps winning and Oklahoma beats Baylor, Kansas State keeps winning, that loss to Kansas State is going to look better and better for Oklahoma.
That's true.
So I wouldn't count out Oklahoma right now. I wouldn't.
I am so proud, by the way, weird tangent. I called Kansas State's first game this year. I was there for the last game of the Bill Snyder era last year and the first game of the Chris Kleiman era, and I walked out of that stadium and I said, they're going to ruin somebody's season potentially. They're going to factor. They won't win at all. Kansas State has found their way into factor. You're right. Their initial ranking at 16 in this playoff thing matters in all that deal. Yeah. And Baylor being as low as they are is a very interesting wrinkle for Oklahoma now because that win that they might get to harvest all of a sudden isn't quite really as valuable.
Yeah. I think that's the other thing about Baylor not being higher is that Oklahoma, when you talk about it, I think Oklahoma's a great football team, fine. But you got to get the resume wins to move your way up. If you're Oregon and Utah, like we were saying, you just realize, okay, I got a tick that's going to help me. It's going to move me up. If you're looking at it from the SEC standpoint, from the Big Ten standpoint, you know you've got those wins. I don't know where Oklahoma finds the equity to help them build up this if everybody in front of them keeps doing their job. It feels like Oklahoma needs a little help, even though Oklahoma, I think, is a spectacular football team.
I have one question. If you put Oklahoma against Georgia on the field right now, who do y'all think comes out with the victory? Because I think Oklahoma comes out with the victory. Because in my eyes, Georgia is not the team that they were last year. They have some holes at the wide receiver position besides Cage. I don't see any other receivers stepping up. So if I'm a defense, I'm stacking the box, and I'm going to make Jake Fromm beat me throwing it to those receivers, inexperienced receivers.
I'm not sure you can stack the box if you're that defense for Oklahoma and still stop DeAndre Swift, though. Like, I think the running game for Georgia, I think we're so obsessed with Jake Fromm and how he looks, and I understand why. He's QB1 at Georgia, right? And he had all of these expectations. But ultimately, this is a running football team that when they just run down everybody's throats, they're better than everybody.
That's the thing I worry about most, and that's what Kansas State exploited against Oklahoma, by the way, which is the fact that they could line up, they could run those diamond formations that we used to see Tebow and Florida State run, and just bludgeon them. And that's a Kansas State offensive line that's good and getting better, super experienced. They are not the dudes that Georgia has. Like, if you want to line up and try and stack the box, they will roll you off the rocket. I worry they beat them the same way we watch teams like, the Patriots run the ball against the Kansas City Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes and all that offense that flies around like
that's
the Big
exactly
12.
the kind of game. That's a great comparison.
I was going to say, that in my mind would be the Georgia Oklahoma statistically is the #1 offense in the country by almost any metric. But that defense worries the ever-loving hell out of me.
Harry Douglas, Christine Williamson, Jason Fitz, Mike Golick Jr.'s Rankings Reaction. We are here every Tuesday hanging out on this couch to get you caught up on everything you need. If you're just tuning in, the #1 team in all the land, according to the playoff committee, is Ohio State. #2, LSU. #3 is Alabama. #4, this is the surprise for some people, Penn State at 4. #5 is Clemson. And again, when you get through the rest of it, Georgia at 6, Oregon 7, Utah 8, Oklahoma 9, and Florida at 10. That rounds out your top 10. A couple of surprises. Baylor sitting in at 12 for an undefeated team. Didn't get as much love as some thought that they might get coming into it. Seems to be a little bit of separation between Oklahoma and Baylor. And the fact that they have a 2-loss Florida team ahead of an undefeated Baylor team says something there. And also Minnesota, a team that we've talked about. Minnesota being ranked as low as they are. Kansas State a little bit higher than some people expected. So there are some surprises. Remember, 3 new committee members this year. So as always with the committee, you've got to learn what this committee thinks is important.
Yep.
And the other thing that I tell everybody every single year, just a reminder, that the committee's job is to pick the best teams, which sounds very simple, but we all define best incredibly different. I mean, that's the thing. It is an opinion-based, subjective moment. So for anyone that comes in and says, well, just win your conference, that might matter. For some committee members, it might not. For some, it's the eye test. For some, it's how do their lines look like. There's so many different things. I just have to take this moment and remind everybody, it's the best teams.
Yeah. And I think the one thing that you said, okay, so if you look at the top 4, you have Ohio State, LSU, Alabama, Penn State. You could say that those are the best teams. But then you look towards the bottom, Oklahoma's at number 9. I would take Oklahoma over Georgia, like you were just saying. So are they really the best teams, or is it the team with the best resume? Alabama doesn't have a really good resume right now. So I feel like the whole thing is a little bit subjective.
I think a big game right now that everybody's going to be waiting on is Georgia versus Auburn, to see how that game plays out and how they compare Georgia to Oregon. Because Oregon lost to Auburn on the last second. Oregon had the game won, but until the last seconds. And they came through Nix came through with a pass, like his father did back in the days, like father, like son. So it all depends on how that game goes. Now, if Georgia routes them, Oregon chances are done.
Yeah.
And it's good because it's strength on strength. It's bad because since that game, Bo Nix hadn't been that dude.
No.
Like, since then, Bo Nix and ranked opponents has been oil and water.
Bo Nix was shined on by the gods of football for that one moment, and then we were like, Bo Nix, he's the great superstar.
I mean, he's got great football in him.
Bo Nix.
That's true. Bo Nix.
Well, he just needs more time. He needs more coaching.
Oh, yeah.
I'll tell you this. It's just like Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow last year was completing 58% of his passes. This year, he's number 1 in NCAA. He's at 78. So once you get another year under your belt, you maybe get a new coach in there, get some guys to coach you up a little better, tweak the things that you aren't so great at. It can change in the blink of an eye.
Yeah, and you're right about Bo Nix. I mean, Bo giveth and taketh away.
That's right.
We've got the end of the Florida game as a reminder of that. Speaking of giveth and taketh, because I feel like that was very commandment-oriented. Thank you so much. I feel pretty good about that. We know the top 10, and, this because top 10 and commandments, we figured that we're going to give 10 commandments that you need to know for the college football world. We even have a tombstone.
Yes.
Look at this.
Is that a tombstone? Isn't it a tablet? I don't think it's called a tombstone.
Yeah, no, it's a tablet. It's a tablet.
A tombstone isn't what you write your commandments on.
You know what,
That's
guys?
probably a fair point.
It looks like a tombstone, but that's not what you...
Going to church on Sunday.
Exactly.
So, that's
Well, judge not, and you shall not be judged.
that is fair.
By the way, this is Rankings Reaction presented by Cheez-It, and we are about to give you some commandments right now.
Thank
Had to
you
get that in. And sneak along. By the way, I was going to say, do you guys want
I want some, you guys are
I feel like I'm hogging them down here.
These are my daughter's favorite snacks, though.
But
Your daughter has
essentially,
impeccable taste.
I'm going to say,
Go ahead.
she does have great taste. God, I'm sorry, I'm enjoying this a little too much. But
We got other flavors, too, by the way.
I know that's the worst part is there's like 12 different kinds of Cheez-Its in here.
The buffalo
and I'm going to have
I'm
to
intrigued.
Oh my God. Was it Queso Funditos
Queso
one over
Fundito.
there?
I mean, it says fun in the name. How can it not be delightful?
Fundito. It's the best kind of fun. But so what we decided here is we figured out in now 3 years of doing this show, but we know the College Football Playoff Committee has been around for, is this the 5th year already now?
Yeah. Yes.
No, this is 6.
It's the 6th year, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
The 6th year. And so in that time, we have learned some things about what you can and cannot do in order to get into the College Football Playoff. And so we wanted to make those clear to you. We wanted to write them down for you. And so I'm going to christen this thing. We're going to add to it every week and all this. But I thought the easiest one, like the easiest line of demarcation that we've seen in the College Football Playoff so far is thou shalt not lose 2 games.
Agreed.
Like that is the immediate, like you are gone, you are done, no bueno.
I will, however, say,
Ooh.
in 2017, a 2-loss Auburn team was at number 2 until they lost the 3rd game. So technically, I mean, I do agree with that. But technically...
You know how many Florida fans right now are just like all up, and they're like, thank you so much. We are headed to the...
I think it was just eye candy. It was just eye candy to get people riled up.
Yeah, exactly.
It was just eye candy.
But they were at number 2. Look at with
that?
2 losses.
I have not great handwriting, but you get the idea.
That
was impressive. You spelled it
Literally my
correctly.
next comment, but hey, it's okay.
I tell you what, I'm not sure if they can take back Notre Dame degrees, but if I misspelled lose 2 games, they would be well within their rights. So, Jason, you're up.
I'm gonna add one to this. And speaking of Notre Dame, this one is right up your alley.
Oh,
Thou shalt
wow.
not. Number 2. This one's fairly easy, right?
Yeah.
Thou shalt not get blown out.
Yeah,
I like it.
no,
Are we good with that? Like you can't get okay.
That makes
Oklahoma better be glad they closed that margin.
I was
They
just
will
going to say, they are this commandment this week, right?
Yep.
They are.
That Kansas State game was a rout for a little bit, like, lest we not forget. And thankfully, that's the best big play offense in college football, and so they got themselves back in it enough to lose by 1 score.
Thank goodness for C.D. Lamb.
Oh, my God.
Is it okay to put an exclamation point on a?
Wow, that's a.
I like that one.
Thank you very much. I felt very good about this. Like my
Because you're
handwriting
really emphasizing it, though.
is
You're
very,
really
very
emphasizing
proper.
it.
Like
Oh, wow. Okay. If there is not a bigger difference between Notre Dame and Juilliard right there, I don't know what is. The football player writing in basically block letters.
yeah, and
Yours is beautiful.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Like, I'm proud of my handwriting. If you guys want a class, you can just stick around for the rest of the night. But no, I mean, we do look at the blowouts, and that's going to be part of, to your point, Oklahoma definitely has to look back on this and say, okay, and that's what everybody moving forward, we can talk about, can 2 teams get in this weekend, with LSU playing Alabama, with Penn State playing Ohio State? What we know from those games is you can lose, but it best be a great game.
Be bad. Yeah. That's
I was say, remember, look no further than last year's Bama LSU game. Like, that was 1 versus 3 in Death Valley, and LSU got stomped out by Bama,
Yeah.
and that was it. Like, that's a curtain call.
Yep. Well, I already think if Alabama loses this year to LSU, I think their chances to get into the playoff are done.
Even if it's close.
Even if it's a close game.
I think so.
Man.
Interesting.
I think so.
That's
Because you
tough
gotta look at
because
it.
They don't have Tua. I mean, or whatever version of Tua they have.
If Tua is there, then they don't have an argument. If he's not there, then they have a legit argument.
But what if it's 80% of Tua? I mean, I'm just playing devil's advocate here, and everybody's going to think I'm an SEC apologist. I don't care.
I put it to you like this. If he's on the field and he's playing, in my eyes, he's 100%.
Well, and so this is the thing that we talk about. Like, the committee was designed to account for these kind of human judgments in all this. The most notable version of the quarterback conversation of this was 2 years ago, Sam Darnold, USC. Didn't start the first 3 games of that season. Comes in, they rattle off 9 straight and looked like one of the best teams in college football. People were flirting with put him in, but 3 losses. Again, we know by some of the commandments.
Well, that's before he was seeing Ghost.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that was pre-Ghost.
Before he was seeing Ghost.
It's Halloween. Halloween. Ghosts, black cats, weird things happen to New York football.
Exactly. But you are right. This weekend, I mean, that's what we keep an eye on for. Listen, in the Big Ten, too. Like, we understand what's at stake this weekend. Is getting blown out automatically erases you from this conversation.
Well, I think that part has to be part of why there is a conversation about playing Tua this weekend. Maybe he's not 100%, and I know that's been a hot, talk show conversation. Do you just sit Tua if he's not 100%? Because the committee will look at it and say,
No.
well, okay, you didn't have your quarterback, but if you sit Tua, you run the risk playing LSU that you are going to get thumped. And if you get thumped, you ain't coming back from that.
Yeah, definitely not. But you know what I'm looking forward to that game, though? I'm looking forward to seeing Alabama's receivers versus LSU secondary and vice versa. I think it's going to be very important to that game, both sides of it.
I mean, it's scary.
You're talking about first rounders all over the field.
But I guess that's the scary part is those first rounders all over the field at DBU for LSU got torn up by Texas.
They did.
Okay, so yes, I'll give a little bit of. I'm the SEC
But Texas
apologist.
has a legit receiving core, though.
I was
do.
on
They
the
do.
field. Humble brag. I was on the field for that game. It was hot. Like, and I mean, like, they say hot. It was like 120 degrees when I did my hit on the field for the digital show.
Jeez Louise.
It was 120 degrees. And you're looking around, you're like, man, I am like, my no-no places had like weird valleys of sweat going on. Like, all right, I'm just saying, like, what? That was.
This is Twitter, but like,
I didn't know my butt crack could sweat that way.
really removing all the mystery from the situation.
No, I mean, so I'm just saying that I think when we were talking about that game going into it, one of the things I said is, hey, I think there was going to be a blow up of yardage in the fourth quarter because everybody's going to be fried in that heat, and that's just a little excuse. I don't think it's wrong though. LSU hasn't played as well this year as the names we expected. Like, we expected better from that secondary we have.
But listen, Jason, you do know LSU in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, it gets hot as hell, right?
Yeah, that's true.
That's true.
That's no excuse. It gets hot in Louisiana.
That's
And I guess I'm saying, I understand there are some ballers in the lineup for Texas at receiver. They are not Jerry Jeudy and company at Alabama.
Definitely not.
Like, you turn on the tape with those dudes every time, and it's like the AN1 mixtape tour. Like, the things they are doing to guys in the open field are unholy and unforgivable, and they make me scared.
I'm interested to see who's Stingley Jr. Who is he going to cover? Or are they going to keep him on one side of the field? They're going to match him. I want to see him match up with Jeudy. I want to see him follow Jeudy.
That's a heavyweight fight there, man.
Christine.
Yes.
Before we let you go.
Oh yeah, I do have to leave.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
You got better places to be in my house. Like, you can call that what it is. We appreciate you coming down here and classing up the joint for us.
No problem. Anytime.
Did the committee get it right?
I think the committee always gets it right.
Ooh.
Christine.
Because they have a really good process for doing it. I think, like I said, they say they want to get the best teams in, but you also have to have a good resume. There's other things that kind of factor into that. You can't necessarily get the best teams in every year. I think that these top 4 currently are the best teams. Alabama, like we said, doesn't have the best resume, but I think that they're the best teams. So I think they got it right at least for week 1.
You don't think they should have flipped Alabama and Penn State?
If you're going to flip Alabama and Penn State, I think it's only because of the resume. It's not necessarily because
that's
the team's
a big
better.
part of it, though.
Yeah. But if we're talking best teams, it's either best teams or the team that deserves it or something else. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So if they're the best teams, I think these 4 are the best teams.
If you had to, I'll use his dad's phrase, wager an uncomfortable amount of money on Alabama versus Clemson on a neutral field today.
Alabama versus Clemson or Alabama versus Penn State?
Alabama versus Clemson, the team that's out of the top 5 right now, or top 4 right now. If you had to wager an uncomfortable amount of money, Alabama versus Clemson on a neutral field today.
Tua's healthy, Alabama.
I'm taking Alabama without Tua being healthy.
Okay.
Really?
I'm just trying to make sure we're all all in agreement that they got Clemson's placement
In my
right.
eyes, Clemson has one person on defense. That's Isaiah Simmons, and he is a grown man. And I feel like the rest of those guys cannot handle Alabama's offense.
It's fair. Christine, you rock my face off. Thanks for hanging out with us.
Thanks, Christine.
We're doing a swap on the take
I was gonna say.
take all the
Good
Cheez-Its you
handful
want.
of the Cheez-It love.
By the way, you're watching Rankings Reaction, presented by Cheez-Its. I don't know if you've noticed this fantastic bowl. We'll offer some Cheez-Its now to our next guest.
How about a line change?
Wow.
What's up, Harry?
What's up, baby? You doing good?
I get up, but this is a very difficult couch for a little
I
guy.
am sunk all the way in the back here. What's up, man? How you doing?
We offer you
A
some
Cheez-It
Cheez-Its.
for you?
I mean, this is next level.
Coming from the 4x1 relay,
Oh, yeah.
Kevin the gun.
Exactly. Kevin, I don't know if you know, you've been here in the past with us. We have glowed up significantly around here. I mean, it's...
I mean,
you came here one, like there was like one cell phone that was being run around.
And
We
it
were
was on
trying
like
to,
a track that went back and forth, right? Like it was Tetris.
I was going to say,
Bouncing off the wall, coming back and forth.
it was bad. And now we have Kevin Nagandi here. We got Cheez-Its in the bowl. Harry Douglas is wearing Louboutins in my house. Like, you cannot hide money. It is incredible. I'm so jealous.
Can I buy
There's a Burberry.
I'm on just
mark on the
I
bottom?
can't touch that, man.
Yeah. I was going to say, I mean, listen, like, Nagandi's over here in the...
broke J's next to a Louboutin.
He's a, I mean, listen, this is nothing to shake a stick at right here. Like, I felt like I was doing something all right. And then I look over there, I go, Harry, what do you got? And he just points to the bottoms, and I go, oh.
Those red bottoms?
Oh, yeah.
Just a little something.
Hey, these were $25 on sale. I don't know if y'all know.
But look,
Harry Douglas, PJ Falk, one and the same right now.
they're like 3 years old. But it's winter, so you know.
Well, like I got like a red marker today. Just like color the bottom of these, and then it counts. Like that's not the same.
That definitely would not count.
Well, that's fair. Kevin Nagandi, you have just joined us, and so we need to get your initial thoughts on the rankings. Thank you so much for your time. Okay, great.
I think the committee's actually a genius group because, look, the season has been somewhat boring, right? And predictable, especially when you look at the top 4 teams in the AP, right? And then you just throw in a Penn State there. Now everybody's talking about this discussion about do they deserve to be there versus Clemson, the defending champ. So to me, it creates a conversation, but it also falls in the category Penn State has played better teams.
Yeah.
If you use that, though, if you use that as the measuring stick here to separate Penn State from Clemson, how come that is not applied with LSU and Ohio State? Considering that LSU beat a team that's number 10, LSU gets that's number 11. Now Texas is gone, but I'm talking about Auburn and Florida, right? And considering who they play, I think without a doubt, you have to put LSU at number 1. But we're not here to fuss about 1 and 2 because we also know it's going to play out different. And that's the key. Did I pop out my mic? All right, there we go.
Wow. Kevin Nagandi's so good, he needs 2 mics.
There we go. That is a first, considering how loud I am.
So let's dive in there for a second.
Yeah.
I see what you're saying, that it doesn't matter because it's going to play.
It doesn't matter at all.
But it does matter in the sense that we're trying to figure out the tendencies of this committee.
Yes.
Is there a takeaway in the because I'm with you. Like if we're taking the strength of resume, I thought LSU would be number 1. I mean, I'm not saying that Ohio State doesn't deserve to be considered the best team in the country, but LSU is on par and they played a tougher schedule. So to me, it seemed like that made sense. So is there something we can take away from this from the committee standpoint?
The only thing I take away from the committee standpoint is how they view Ohio State. And Ohio State has been dominant in every single game. And it's really tough when you try to use that same measuring stick with LSU because they weren't dominant against Auburn. But listen, Auburn is 10 times better than any team that Ohio State has faced. And you can make a statement, hey, what about they play Wisconsin? I'm sorry, Wisconsin is a one-dimensional team. And if you figure out a way and you use your speed and you stop them, they're not doing anything. And we saw that.
And Auburn has 2 guys on their defensive line that's going to make
They're playing Sundays, yeah.
Very, very happy.
Auburn trots out with refrigerators. With
exactly.
To a point that if Auburn had any consistency at quarterback,
There you go.
that team would be in the top 5.
Yep.
And we could probably be talking about them being undefeated. And this is not just on Bo Nix, but in reality, the offense can't move. And we saw that he failed in the red zone against the Gators. He struggled, and there were several opportunities in the second half against LSU when he struggled, even though the Auburn defense did what they could. So, to me, the most fascinating thing is how the committee has viewed Clemson and Alabama in this whole thing. Because they're telling Clemson, the top 4 will sort itself out. You just keep doing what you're doing. Yeah. We know what you're going to do. And so win out, you'll fall in. You're going to fall in just because that's how it's going to be played out, right? What they're telling Alabama is, if you don't win on Saturday, you're done.
Yes, that's how I feel. Yeah, I think if they do not win on Saturday, they are not making a college football playoff.
And here's why: because when you look at Alabama's measuring stick at the end of the season, right, and you look at their quality wins, you're going to look at potentially a 4-loss Auburn team. Yep. You're going to look at potentially a 5-loss Texas A&M team, right? If you can't beat LSU at home in Tuscaloosa, regardless of if Tua's 75%, 80%, if you can't beat LSU, then you don't deserve to get in. And I think the other thing is how they view the Pac-12.
Yep.
Because the biggest key for the Pac-12 is those 2 teams at 7 and 8, they win out. They need a top 10 quality win at the end of the season.
And they can get it against each other.
Exactly. And then that's where you factor those 2 teams in, getting in the top 4.
And quickly, I will also say, you mentioned Bo Nix. How much different is our Oregon conversation because of one spectacular quarter?
It's crazy, right?
Nix. Like, one spectacular quarter has changed.
And Oregon was dominant the majority of that game, right?
The
and
entire
then
game.
he makes a couple of plays in that final drive.
But I guess that's the funny part, right, is you talk about that could potentially be one of Alabama's good wins.
Yeah.
And we're going to count that as a good enough loss for Oregon for them to be potentially in the conversation, provided they add a Pac-12 championship against a team in Utah right now whose best win is... what? Exactly. Like, their best win is going to be against each other. That's the interesting part is... This is the human committee version of it. As much as they're told not to value what's happened in the last few years and all these things like that, we can't help but in our minds hold Alabama to a bit of a different standard than we hold them.
But I also believe, though, and the committee has gotten it right on these, hey, let's get Ohio State in as a 4 seed several years ago, right? Yep. Let's get Alabama in, because that was the eye test, right? I believe the way this is stacked up, at least as of right now, if we don't see multiple upsets like a team losing twice in this top 5, I believe that you cannot get 2 teams from one conference in this year's playoff. I really think that we need to consider the Pac-12 a 1-loss team, that is Oregon, Utah.
Not so fast, my friend.
All right, do you think an Alabama 1-loss team can get in?
If LSU loses the SEC championship to Georgia, Georgia and LSU are both getting into the playoffs.
Does it have to be close in your mind, or
It can't be 14 points or more. 14 points or more loss.
I think we're always assuming close because we've always talked about it. Getting blown out is the kiss of death in this committee. In addition to having 2 losses, getting blown out is the kiss of death around here. And I think you could afford that same thing. Like we talk about these 1-loss Pac-12 teams and who they might potentially beat. Penn State loses a close one to Ohio State and gets left out of this one. They've already got, we talked about, better quality wins. That's why they're in the top 4 now than anyone from the Pac-12, and we're going to deny them because they could potentially lose to the #1 team in the country, and it would have to be famous. It would have to be a close one, all that stuff. I think the Big Ten could have the best shot of sending 2 teams to the playoffs if they're not careful.
I already told you, I think it's the best conference this year.
All right, let's go down the line here. Let's do this, right? Let's try and figure this out. Clemson goes undefeated. They're in, right?
Yep.
Ohio State goes undefeated. They're in. So we got half the group, right? Now we start to break down the 1-loss teams. If you play your scenario of Georgia 1 loss, but they beat LSU and give them their 1 loss, you get those 2 teams in, and you do that over a 1-loss Oklahoma team if they went out. You do that over a 1-loss Oregon team if they.
Well, you would have to. Yep. Over those 2 teams, yes. Yep. Penn State will have more of an argument than an Oklahoma or Oregon or Utah.
Kev, especially because, and that's why this first rating was important, where Baylor fell in all of this one.
Like with 12, right?
Yeah, 12. No, I think they were, no, Baylor was 12. You're right. Baylor was 12, Minnesota was 17. That's the one we were thinking of. But I just think because that win wouldn't look as good as now potentially what those other teams we just described could have, that's going to hurt Oklahoma in this.
I just don't see you leaving the LSU out if they lose to a top 6, top 5 Georgia.
Let's quickly run through the rest of the rankings. For anybody that's just joining us, it's Rankings Reaction. You're looking at Mike Golick Jr., Jason Fitz, Kevin Nagandi, Harry Douglas, as we are getting you caught up on everything. And we'll run you through some of these for the rankings. If you haven't seen, if you're just tuning in, number 1 on the rankings we've been talking about all day was Ohio State. Ohio State, LSU is your 1, 2, Alabama 3, Penn State 4, Clemson 5, Georgia 6, Oregon 7, Utah 8, Oklahoma 9, Florida 10. Then we get into the next, the best of the rest. Auburn, we've been talking about 11. Baylor is number 12. And 13, 14, 15 isn't on the screen, so we're just going to script through them for a second while Mike gets the laptop running.
Listen, we're not all the way fixed, all right?
Come on, Mike.
So we got it right here. We got Wisconsin at 13, right?
There we go. Look at that.
At 14. Notre Dame at 15.
Oh, that's well played. And then Kansas State at 16, Minnesota 17, Iowa 18, Wake Forest 19, Cincinnati 20. And we round out with a couple of the AAC teams, too. You have at 21 Memphis, then you have Boise State, Oklahoma State, Navy, and SMU. So when we look at the rest of that list, what really stands out? I mean, we've talked a little bit. Baylor is lower than we expected on this. I mean, they've got a 2-loss Florida team ahead of an undefeated Baylor team. But I think the Minnesota being 17 with Kansas State ahead of them was also just, to all of us, an eyebrow raiser. It just seems a little surprising just because Minnesota is undefeated and there's been so much talk about them, and then the committee comes in and says, not so fast.
But they value the Oklahoma win. They value that that's the best team out of all the to me, it's fascinating at 13, 14, 15, where Wisconsin, I mean, dominates Michigan, right? Just 1 spot ahead. Then Michigan dominates Notre Dame, just 1 spot ahead.
When you look at Kansas State, though, Kansas State, their only losses is to Baylor and Oklahoma State. Now, the Oklahoma State one is questionable. The Baylor one is not questionable because Baylor's undefeated right now.
Yeah.
But I guess but you're right, Kev. Like, you see clearly where some of the gulfs exist in all of this, right? And that is certainly where a gulf, because they looked at that Notre Dame team and said, all right, from there on down, do we really think again? And this is it's always the imperfect mix of best and most deserving and all this. Do we really think on a neutral field? Jason, like you just said, if you had to wager an uncomfortable amount of money, are you putting one of those teams over Notre Dame, Michigan, Wisconsin? And the answer is no, and that's why we get them all bunched there all weird like that.
Yeah, the Auburn one at 11 is interesting. Let's go back to
Very interesting with their quarterback play.
Yeah, exactly. Let's go back to the Big 12 conversation, too. They have no respect for, I think, the Big 12 and how it's looked, right? If Oklahoma's at 9.
Texas.
Yeah, because of the 3 losses, right?
Yeah. Oh, 100%.
That's Texas's fault. Texas made this conference look like a non-factor in this college football playoff.
How much of that is reactionary to that, though?
According to Ehlinger, we're bad.
I mean, we all bought into that at the beginning of the year. I mean, we were all looking at it and saying, wow, this Texas team is back. and now you feel like you've been sort of like kicked in the shin by it, and everybody's a little like, I'm out on that. And you're right, like it trickles down to the whole conference. I mean, it is right or wrong. We have to acknowledge that the committee's full of human beings.
Totally.
And human beings, like we've talked about it, they're told not to take last year into account. They're told not to think about anything outside of the bubble, but they're still humans, and there's got to be some spot where you just come in, and because we bought into the Texas hype, and now Texas doesn't look like they're any good, all of a sudden it's well, I'm not going down that path.
Strength of record for the opponent that you play is a critical thing here. I mean, Oregon, the way they value that Oklahoma win over Texas now is out the door, right? And now a team like Oregon has to root for Auburn the rest of the way. If Auburn wins out the rest of the way and pulls a couple shockers for them, that makes the Oregon game look bigger and better. To me, though, how Oregon plays out as a one-loss team the rest of the way is critical, because I think there are going to be a ton of ADs that are going to be watching how the committee views Oregon, because here's Oregon thinking outside and saying, we're going to play somebody tough. To start the season, we're going to go 2,000 miles away and go and not have a cream puff on the schedule here and face an SEC team.
You can't penalize.
Right?
You can't penalize teams for that, because
exactly.
teams are not going to want to do it anymore.
Exactly, and that's why ADs are going to watch this and say, why am I going to schedule this again? Why am I going to be in this position? Because you're not going to get rewarded.
And I think that's the interesting part is we're always trying to see what message is the committee sending, because everyone's line always is well, why would you schedule anyone? Why not just go through a bunch of cupcakes, go undefeated on your schedule, and find your way in? Well, we have seen, all right, that's not quite good enough when you've got a Penn State over a Clemson team that people might think is better. And we still all remember it's largely the same Clemson team outside that D-line that went and waxed Bama in the championship. But if you're not going to put it on the line this year, like Oregon was willing to do, like Ohio State and Oklahoma were willing to do a couple years ago when they played a dangerous out-of-conference. Georgia's going to get credit for playing Notre Dame in a true home-and-home.
Alabama normally does every year.
Yes.
Normally, Alabama does it every year just about.
You're right, They opened up a couple years ago against Florida State, right? When Florida State came in as the top 3 team. And then the injuries, and then that team fell apart.
But I'll say this for Oregon. I think Oregon and Utah going forward, I don't believe they can have close wins.
No,
unless it's against each other.
No, they need to blow people out.
Except against each other, they have to blow everybody out from this point forward.
Yeah, both of those teams have to blow all of their opponents out, and then whoever wins that game has to blow that person out, and then all of a sudden you're looking at it.
Wait, but guys, the committee doesn't incentivize margin of victory.
Sure. We'll go with that. We'll go with that.
You guys had an interesting conversation before I stepped in here about what was the conversation? Georgia versus Oklahoma?
I think on
you would take Oklahoma?
I would.
I would take Georgia.
I would take Georgia.
Because Georgia's not the same team that I watched last year. They're not the same team.
But Oklahoma's defense is still the same team I watched last year.
But I'll tell you this, though.
Who are they?
But I'll tell you this. You can't tell me if you're playing against Georgia and you're looking at their offense, okay, how can we stop? How can we beat Georgia? I'm going to stack the box. I'm going to stack that box, and I'm going to man up their receivers. They're not proven. They're young. They're inexperienced. They're just not proven.
They are. My biggest problem with them is quite honestly the way they call plays. When they played Notre Dame, and I watched
terrible! They started the game with 5 or 6 passes.
Well, but you know what? I would rather that. Let them push it down the field. I get those receivers aren't there, but Jake Fromm is that dude. Jake Fromm is battle tested enough and can make enough of those plays downfield that you just need. You can't live and die. If you're going to operate at the top level of college football, the one thing you can't be is one-dimensional.
You guys,
but against Notre Dame, I didn't think they should have did that because Notre Dame's D line didn't match up against Georgia's offensive line.
Well,
they were way smaller. So
they were way smaller, and so you try and bludgeon them on the ground. But the difference is, I think great teams got to hit their splits and doubles at the table, and I think you got to do that through the air.
You guys eat some Cheez-Its. I got work to do here for a second.
No other show in ESPN where I can eat on the air.
I love you. Nagata's going to be here every single week.
The people in Georgia are going to kill me when I get back, too. I still love y'all. Hey, I love y'all, baby.
All right, so we've gone through the top 25 rankings. Before we go any further, it's a good time to have a little fun, look at some video, because now it's time to review the weekend of college football. These are your crunch time moments presented by Cheez-Its. We'll start with West Virginia versus Baylor. Check this one out. This is great. Baylor undefeated, getting all they can handle from West Virginia on Thursday night. Obviously, I don't know what this is a different play than I thought. Oh, we've got the fumble.
God in heaven.
We've got the fumble happening here. which, by the way, Pat McAfee used as a moment to remind us all that punt is the most exciting play in all of football.
That's how you wallop the hog right there.
I don't even know what wallop a hog.
Pigskin, the hog, the
That's fair. That's fair. A fun moment here, obviously.
McAfee doesn't need a punt to remind us that the punt is the most exciting.
No, yeah, exactly.
That is a fair point. And obviously, West Virginia got everything, gave Baylor everything they can handle in that one. And we'll also take a look, give the Ivy League a little bit of love here. At this point, Dartmouth taking on Harvard. I love this. Final seconds, Dartmouth down 3. Their quarterback goes like full greased pig, manages to slide out of the pocket somehow. Then we got a tip drill up with the touchdown.
God.
Harry Douglas as a former receiver.
That's a classic one because those kids are going to remember that for the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
Harvard grads, Harvard alum, they're going to remember that catch for the rest of their lives.
And you know what? Like we always say, knock it down.
I couldn't believe that. Right?
Going up there trying to catch it if you're any of those Harvard defenders. Knock it down.
He's not coachable.
Day one stuff.
He's not coachable.
I'm gonna
Lord.
say, you know what? That's rare. You can say that about a Harvard kid. Not coachable.
Not coachable.
I just like the fact that I said slid out of the pocket like a greased pig, and none of you guys gave me any, like even a chuckle for that.
The hog, the pig, we got it all on here. We are here for your pork-related reference.
Yeah, that's fair. You guys were just eating Cheez-Its. That's what happens. Mike Golick Jr., Jason Fitz, Kevin DeGandhi, Harry Douglas. You're watching Rankings Reaction, brought to you by Cheez-It, as we are just running that bowl up and down. And I'm not lying. It was full. It was full earlier. Now it is not.
We have been doing some things over here.
I'm not proud of what's happened to the diet.
I'm hungry, so.
I'm
You're not proud. I'm extremely proud. This is the most on-brand thing we can be doing.
Nor should you, man.
Okay, so I'm supposed to do some work here, but I just took a Cheez-It, so you guys just talk for a second because I got to talk to Heather Dinich, but first I got to finish eating my Cheez-It.
And see, this is an important time. If you are, for some reason, just parachuting into the world of college football now or the college football rankings now, Heather Dinich, if you are not already following Heather Dinich, reading Heather Dinich on ESPN.com, or listening to her, she is outside the committee room, I think with a cup, like trying to listen through the door into what they say every week down in Dallas. She does an unbelievable job reading the tea leaves. She knows it like the back of her hand, and so we are very fortunate to talk to her.
So I'm going to talk to Heather now, and let's start with the most important question, Heather, that we ask every year. Have you gotten a chair outside of the door so that you can hear better, or do they still make you stand there the whole time?
They still make me stand there, yeah. But you know what? There's not a security guard yet.
Can't hear Heather.
He doesn't come until the final ranking.
I think Heather's talking to me, but I can't hear her.
They can't hear me, guys. They can't hear me. I can only hear myself.
Keep talking.
Okay, Heather, what surprised we lost Heather? We do have Heather, we don't have Heather.
There you go, you got
What
Heather.
surprised you the most about the rankings as they came out?
Can you guys hear me? Okay. Are you guys all right? Are you eating Cheez-Its? Okay.
Yeah, I'll tell you a funny story.
So what's surprised me most about the
Listen,
ranking
we
is
crack
that
jokes that
Penn
this is a
State
digital thing too.
was at
We had
number 4. Clemson number 5. Clearly, defending national champs doesn't mean anything, and we knew that going in. But I think that there's a lot of mixed messages going in terms of the committee saying that eye test matters with Alabama. A resume can be overcome with their play. But for Minnesota and Baylor, good luck because you guys haven't played anybody.
At this point, I think the committee was all in.
Oh.
Oh, okay. Well, we're just going to see what happens.
That was something. You know what? Every once in a while, we are the same internet show that started here 3 years ago.
Yes, we are.
And that is through no fault of Heather, by the way, or anyone else. Like, it is just who we are at our core.
But you know what? The moment is less awkward for us when we get to hang out on the couch and just eat while we talk about it.
Yeah.
So you eat through that awkwardness.
Okay, so there's a little bit of a presumption that this is all going to work itself out over the course of the next few weeks. I think we understand that. Is that enough peace of mind for Clemson fans who I'm sure today, right now, are outraged by the blatant level of disrespect? And I'll double barrel the question even though we're not supposed to. I will look at Clemson and also ask you, should the Clemson that we've seen in the playoffs in the past be a consideration to the Clemson that we see today?
Can I answer the way I want
to? Please.
Hell no. No. What you did last year in the past has nothing to do with this year. Clemson is definitely not the same team. They don't have the same defensive guys. Trevor Lawrence is not the same person he was last year. He has 8 interceptions right now. And it's not like it's 8 interceptions, okay, I'm trying to fit it in tight windows, let my receiver make a play. It's 8 interceptions, bonehead, I'm just throwing it right to the defender in 8 interceptions. So, no, they're not the same team. You take one guy off that team, and Clemson, I think, will have 2 or 3 losses. Travis Etienne is the most important player on Clemson's roster.
I agree with you on that. He's the most valuable guy. I actually think this ranking is a godsend for Dabo. It's a wake-up call. Put it on the bulletin board and say, look at you guys. You went undefeated. You're the defending champs, and no one cares about you.
And honestly, special.
Right? It's 100% a Nick Saban special. And to me, I think Dabo will find a way. I mean, he doesn't need to do it because they've heard all the noise. But I think if you're a Clemson fan, you just kind of laugh about this whole thing because you're like, it's going to play itself out. Yeah. We're going to roll through the rest of our ACC schedule. They got to keep an eye on South Carolina just because it's a rivalry game at the end of the season, right? But the way this whole thing will play out, I kind of feel bad for the team that finishes in first place on the coastal side, right?
Oh my God, that's going to be brutal. The annual sacrificial slaughter for Clemson.
And that's going to be potentially Virginia. But here's the other thing: in 2 weeks or a week and a half, they got Wake Forest. The difference is that Wake Forest is coming to Death Valley, and Clawson's done a phenomenal job. They're 7-1. I'd like to see what Clemson looks like that weekend because that's going to be their biggest test of the season.
It's a big game.
I think what happened after that North Carolina game was there was a stain on Clemson that's been really hard to remove. But in the last couple of weeks, we've all been looking up and seeing, wait a minute, that defense that yet again, and this is the Brent Venables special right now, as we all talk about him potentially taking head coaching jobs that aren't going to happen. The Brent Venables special is you lose talent to the NFL and you reload and you have what is still, by almost any conceivable metric, one of the top 5 defenses in college football.
You nailed it. It's the one thing that we can count on when we watch that team this whole season, right?
Every time.
We know we can count on him, Etienne, and that defense.
But if there's any person right now that's yelling about conference champions should automatically make the playoff, I would always say, anytime you're looking at a situation where somehow, some way, a Virginia team can win the Coastal, and maybe that Saturday or maybe that weekend get lucky and win the ACC, I don't want to live in a world where that team automatically goes to the playoff in a year like this where there are substantial teams that are ready to pop in.
Please spare my eyes.
Yeah, but if you do that, then you go 8 teams, right? Because then that'll allow you to do the 2 wild cards,
I think that's too many.
8 teams, really?
I think 6. You get the first top 2 teams a bye.
I'm with you on that.
You do 6. You let the other 4 teams play it out. Get the top 2 teams a bye, then you go from there. 8 teams is entirely too many. That's too many games. That's just too much.
At the end of the day, I think college football likes the conversation they get on 4. Speaking of conversation, we've got way more important rankings to get to. We're going to do this. We're going to rank some different things as we go. Our way more important rankings since it's the beginning of No Shave November. In case you can't tell, I'm several days into this. We're going to rank the top 6 beards in sports.
Oh, you guys already did this.
Top 6 beards in sports.
Oh, no.
They've given it to Harden.
What?
Harden. Oh, wow. Number 2, Kimbo Slice.
Rest in power.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, who do we have at number 3? We did not get the chance to make the list.
Nasty. That's the nasty one there.
Yeah.
Okay. Jake Arrieta.
Jake Arrieta needs to be higher on the list.
Ryan Wilson.
Outside looking in?
Wow.
Absolutely not. I will tell you guys this. The best compliment I ever got in my life. I was a rookie, undrafted free agent with the Pittsburgh Steelers. I'm in the offseason program. And Brett Kiesel's in and out. He's a veteran. He has been there. And all of a sudden, someone looks inside, and I had a big, long beard at that point, and they go, man, that looks like baby Kiesel over there. And I look in the back, and on the Stairmaster is Brett Kiesel, and he looks over me and just gives the slow nod of approval. I went home and called my parents. That was a day. So him being at 6 is a travesty, a sham, and a mockery. It's a Travis sham mockery.
I mean, did we not even
like him at 6?
No, I think he should be at 1. Brett Kiesel is an all-time sports beard. How dare these people?
He should be in it, period, because every time Brett Kiesel came to see what's the D corner that we had? Dick LeBeau.
Oh, yeah.
He came to see Dick LeBeau in our meetings. Both games, we lost. So, Brett Kiesel, you're bad luck. So take you and your beard somewhere else.
Wow.
I'm a little curious why we hate hockey players. Like the entire Stanley Cup playoff run, hockey guys don't shave. And I mean, there's some
because
staggering.
They can't smile with their beards because they're missing so many.
But maybe that's part of the charm. Like that's part of what's alluring about it.
It's like a jack-o'-lantern.
Wow, judgment about the dental work over here.
James Harden at number 1. reeks of some NBA season just got started recency bias.
Wow. You don't like that? Like
his mouth peeking out of the beard reminds me of like an octopus beak.
It reminds me of the Family Guy where there's like the bird that's living in the.
Oh yeah,
it reminds me of what?
You didn't know that? Or like squid and octopus, they got a beak in there. Scary as hell. Scary as hell.
It looks like what again?
That's what you learn at Notre Dame. There's a whole class on that.
That's why Cheese has got on board this year. We got octopus stuff in here.
I'm gonna bring that up for my 7-year-old and 5-year-old tomorrow morning.
There you go, see?
That, man.
This is the only kind of stuff you can get on Rankings Reactions, brought to you by Cheez-It. Thanks for hanging out with us. We'll be here every single Tuesday getting you caught up on everything you need to know and reacting and ranking absolutely incredible things. Again, thanks for hanging out with us. Come back next week. This has been Rankings Reaction, brought to you by Cheez-It.